Do you think the world's finally ready to face the truth about metabolism and cancer?
We have about 1,700 people a day dying from cancer, which comes to about 70 an hour. They spend more time on how the drug is going to kill you, yet they show somebody riding a bicycle and swimming or kayak. Why don't they show you the guy sitting on the toilet for 6 hours a day? It's just like, they're going to blow out your kidneys and your liver. Oh, I'm a quack or something like this. I'm not the one radiating and poisoning people to make them healthy. So cancer is one singular disease, fact, that the system does not want to hear. Because
you can only block the sun with your thumb for so long.
So I'm just telling people, brace yourselves. The paradigm change is coming.
Welcome to the Born to Heal podcast. I'm Dr. Katie Deming, your host. And on this show, we explore holistic practices for cancer prevention and healing. Let's welcome Professor Seyfried back to the show.
Well, thank you, Dr. Deming. It's very nice to be back and have another conversation with you. Thank you.
I'm very excited for this. So, for those listeners who maybe haven't listened to our first episode, I'd love to just kind of jump in talking about metabolic disease. And, you have challenged one of the most entrenched ideas in medicine, that cancer is not a genetic disease. And after decades of resistance to this, do you think the world's finally ready to face the truth about metabolism and cancer?
Well, we would like to think that's the case, but the resistance is not against the science. This is what people have to realize. The resistance is not based on incorrect science or incomplete science. The resistance is based more on a change to the status quo. Whenever you have a paradigm change, it's always met with resistance in the form of disregard or ignore it first. Just don't get it. If you start talking about it, you may make it worse. So don't talk about it. What we have going for us is a current system that is terribly broken. And therefore, there will be a momentum to change a very broken system. Right now, as I say, every year, the American Cancer Society publishes their prospectus on how many people are going to die from cancer. And this year, they're expecting over 618,000 people, which comes to about 1,700 per day. So in the United States, in hospitals throughout the country, we have about 1,700 people a day dying from cancer, which comes to about 70 an hour. And of course, this is scattered throughout the entire United States. And of course, people are dying all over the world from cancer in all major countries. And we're not making any major progress. And this is the tragedy. And the only major progress we have made in the United States was the anti-smoking campaign. And this should be an eye-opener because there's no major new drugs that have come along that have really have major impact on reducing cancer deaths. And every year it gets worse and worse. It's not better. And yet we have a clear plan for reducing death and suffering based on a new understanding of what cancer is. And it's essentially being ignored and not discussed. And we have to wait for enough people to become outraged about this. And we have to also realize that about 50% of people who do take standards of care are killed by the treatments. So about 50% of people being irradiated and poisoned and surgically mutilated die from the disease. From the treatments. And those who survive these treatments often pay a significant price in overall health. Oftentimes they have now new maladies for the fact of surviving radiation and poisonous chemicals that they didn't have before. And now overall their life expectancy on the planet will be reduced, even though the cancer may never come back that they were treated for. They end up dying from some complication of the treatments they received to manage the cancer. And this is a tragedy of a monumental proportion. And our metabolic approach to managing cancer, where we have clinics now and we have publications showing tremendous success, In small, well, they say you don't do a big clinical trial and this and that. But you can see when you do metabolic therapy the correct way, which involves drug diet combinations and doesn't throw out parts of standards of care. You just have to know how to use them differently. You get much, much better outcome. We're not saying don't do radiation toxic chemicals. You just have to know when and how to use those in strategic ways rather than using overdosing and terrible situations where you're using that as your sole tool when we have metabolic therapy that will allow those other approaches to work even better with minimal, if any, toxicity. So this is the paradigm change that has to happen if people want to make a real change in cancer survival. And the biggest stumbling block right now is how you generate enough revenue to replace the highly revenue generating systems that we have. And I think that's probably the most important resistance is people can't figure out how to make enough money on metabolic therapy to replace some of the reductions in costs from other therapies. So this is the situation. But I think the bottom line is people want to live. They don't want a lot of the things that they're being confronted with. And they're not being told. And not only that, if you go to a lot of these oncology clinics, they never heard of anything about metabolic therapy. They tell the cancer patients, eat whatever you want. They have them eat high glucose and carbs to put weight on because they're being poisoned from drugs. I mean, it's just like there's a lack of knowledge. It's scary. It's really, and now the patients are learning more about how to manage the disease, and the poor oncologists are getting angry, having patients tell them what they want. So the whole system is in turmoil, and it's becoming worse and more turmoil. It has to change. And it's got to change because we're losing too many good folks. Too many souls are dying needlessly from a disease that we now know how to manage, and we're not managing it correctly.
Absolutely. So you're singing my language for sure. But, you said something in there. You said we have a fundamental misconception of what cancer is. Tell us, what is cancer?
Well, cancer the definition is dysregulated cell growth, cell division out of control. If you have a population of cells that are no longer responding to signaling pathways that tell them don't grow, all of our cells need to grow, not all, but most of the cells in our various tissues, maybe with the exception of neurons and some other cells, we have replacement cells. Some cells get worn out and they're replaced by new cells that take over the job. But there's a regulation of when and how much they grow. In the crypt of the colon, we're constantly replacing cells in the colon and in the liver and different organs. But the replacement is ordered. It's an ordered replacement. It's not a disordered replacement. Even if we take a lobe of liver off a person for one reason or another, the liver has an incredible regenerative capacity where they will regenerate the cells the parts of the liver that were removed. But the replacement, the regeneration, happens in an ordered way. This contrasts with hepatoma, which is a liver tumor from a hepatocyte that has dysregulated cell growth. So what's the difference between the regenerating normal liver cell, knowing when it should stop growing, and the hepatoma, which continues to grow in a dysregulated way? And the cancer establishment, American Cancer Society and the National Institutes of Health, NCI, and all major academic centers think they're mutations, somatic mutations that cause the cell to be in a dysregulated way. That's not true. We now know that there are many cancers that have no mutations, and we have cancer mutations present in normal cells that never become in a dysregulated way. So we have massive evidence to say that these mutations are not responsible for the dysregulated growth. And what is responsible is the disruption of the mitochondria energy metabolism, of the organelle in our cells that generates the life of the cell. And that's the organelle that controls when a cell should divide and when it should not divide. And that organelle, that controlling organelle, becomes corrupted and the cell begins to divide out of control because the checkpoints that control division are no longer under the control of the mitochondria. It lost its energetic capacity, and the cell falls back on ancient fermentation pathways evolutionarily conserved ancient fermentation pathways that were unregulated billions of years ago. And these cells are unregulated just the way they were. So we put all the path together in a very logical, all based on hard science and experimentation data. We know exactly what's going on for the most part. We don't know some of the mechanistic minutia, but we certainly have a bigger picture. And we know the most important thing is we know how to manage it without toxicity, because we know how to stop the dysregulated growth. You simply have to take and restrict the fuels that are causing the fermentation pathways, these ancient fermentation pathways. And once you stop the glucose and the glutamine driving the dysregulated growth, the tumor cells die. They're not flexible. They're locked into a fermentation metabolism. So if you take away their fermentable fuels, glucose and glutamine, they die. And you transition the whole body over to nutritional ketosis, and the normal cells get healthy while the tumor cells get killed without toxicity. It's unbelievable. It works, and people survive, and they do really well. And we're publishing papers on these people. But they say, oh, it's one case here, one case there. We got cases for advanced breast cancer, colon cancer, pancreatic cancer, brain cancer. Oh, you only have one or two. Oh, it's always some like, well, show me 1,000 people. And we're working towards thousands of people, but we have to start somewhere. And we're at the beginning, and eventually it's going to be the standard of care for all people. We're going to be able to manage this disease without too much cost and have people survive a lot longer with a higher quality of life. What is wrong with that? Please tell me.
It doesn't generate revenue. That's you answered your own question in the beginning.
What is wrong? And they say, oh, I'm a quack or something like this. I'm not the one radiating and poisoning people to make them healthy. You tell me who the quacks are. Right?
I love it. So, let me just, for my listeners who maybe this is the first time they're hearing a conversation with you, just to like bring people up to speed. So what Professor Seyfried is talking about is that cancer cells, by definition, use a form of metabolism that is different than healthy cells that have healthy functioning mitochondria, right? Or normal cells use oxidative phosphorylation. Cancer cells are using this rudimentary ancient form of metabolism because their mitochondria are either dysfunctional or deficient. And so therefore they're using fermentation, which means they rely on fuel sources like glucose primarily. And then you also brought up glutamine. Can you speak to glutamine just so that people can come up to this? I think a lot of people understand the idea of cancer using glucose as its primary fuel, but can you talk a little bit about the glutamine aspect of that?
Yeah, well, the glutamine aspect is a very interesting one because it provides the nitrogen for the synthesis of DNA and RNA and proteins, because glucose has no nitrogen. So if a cell is dividing, it has to synthesize new DNA and RNA and protein. So that's a nitrogenous. You need nitrogen. So the glutamine and don't forget, the glutamine in our body is the most abundant amino acid in the blood. So if you do a blood analysis on all of us, we'll find that glutamine is by far much more abundant in the bloodstream than any of the other amino acids there. So it's always there in abundance. There's no diet that we can know about that will lower glutamine like we can lower glucose. So that's why we have to use certain drugs to lower glutamine. Because people always ask me, "Oh, what can I do to lower my glutamine? What should I eat? Oh, if I eat a piece of meat, will it make the glutamine?" Listen, we already have supersaturated levels of glutamine in the blood. So eating a piece of meat isn't going to increase any more than what we already have. So there's no diet. Now,
okay, actually, I'm going to stop you with that one because that one's a big one. So many people are afraid of meat because they're afraid of the glutamine. So can you just say that again for people? Because this is a piece that I think is really missed by most people.
Yeah, well, as I said, the glutamine in our bloodstream is already maxed out. We have the highest level of glutamine of all the amino acids, far greater than the amount the tumor needs, okay? But interestingly enough, despite that, the tumor cells in cachexia will degrade muscle, and that's why you say you lose weight from the cancer. And the glutamine from the muscle is being also filtered into the tumor cell as well. So the tumor cell is gobbling up glutamine, but it's already present in sufficient amounts to satiate that need. We can certainly lower glucose with diets and things, but we can't really use the same strategy for lowering glutamine. That's why we need drugs. And we need specific drugs, and they must be used strategically. And that's why we developed the press pulse therapeutic strategy, pressing glucose down and replacing glucose with ketone bodies can transition the whole body away from sugar glucose to this new fuel called ketone body. But that doesn't target the glutamine. So when we have the body in nutritional or therapeutic ketosis, then we can come in with drugs that are specifically going to target the ability of the tumor cell to use glutamine. But we have to be so careful with this, because if we use it for too long or too high of a concentration, we damage our gut, our microbiome, and also paralyze our immune system. Our immune cells are needed to pick up the dead tumor cells. So if we kill a lot of tumor cells and they're hanging around, the corpses of the dead tumor cells are in the tissue, and your immune system has to come in and clean the mess up. And if we're targeting glutamine too aggressively, the very immune cells and the tumor cells both need the same fuel. So when we choke hold the glucose and then strategically target glutamine, we start wiping out these tumor cells. The immune cells get paralyzed, but they're not killed. So we pull off the drug that's targeting glutamine, allowing the immune cells to come in and do their job. And then when they, of course, the tumor grows a little bit, but then we come back and we do the same thing over and over again. So you slowly degrade the tumor while maintaining the health and vitality of all the other cells in the body and other organs. So we prevent all kinds of collateral damage, but you have to be strategic in how you target the glutamine. And that's where the cutting edge is right now. Number one, what are the drugs that will target glutamine? What are the best drugs? How often do we use them? What dosages do we use them? It's dosage, timing, and scheduling. And that's where we are. And that's where we're working out the details for that. So the best drug is 6-deoxynoreleucine, but it's not available, which is an outrage. It's a terrible outrage. The Food and Drug Administration is constantly approving toxic drugs. And here we have a drug that's no less toxic than some of those other things. But once you know how to use the drug, you can reduce its toxicity. We already showed that when you put patients in nutritional ketosis, you can use much less of the drug. And that also goes for chemotherapy. We can use half the doses of chemo when the patient is in nutritional ketosis. So Don was used in high doses on little kids and other cancer patients years ago, and it said, oh, it was too toxic. Well, of course, you used it in the wrong way. You didn't know how to use it. You have the tool in your hand and you didn't know how to use it. And now we're working on ways to maintain the power of these drugs and remove their toxicity, which is like having a new drug. FDA is not interested in this stuff. They're clueless. They prefer to use these drugs based on the gene theory of cancer, and they're very toxic and kill you. And they say, well, how do we know that? Why don't you listen to the advertisements on TV at night for these drugs? They spend more time on how the drug is going to kill you than they do and yet they show a happy guy. Why don't they, or somebody riding a bicycle and swimming or kayaking? Why don't they show you the guy sitting on the toilet for 6 hours a day? It's just like they're going to blow out your kidneys and your liver. And they always say a chance. Yeah, well, there's a greater chance that it could kill you as well. Metabolic therapy does not kill anybody. At least we haven't killed anybody with nutritional ketosis. I mean, people usually get very healthy. So it's nutritional ketosis combined with specific glutamine targeting drugs that work together synergistically to slowly degrade the tumor. And yes, water only fasting. These putting these bodies like fasting and thing that lowers the blood sugar, elevates the ketones, and then you can modify diets to maintain low glucose and elevated ketones, and then come in strategically with glutamine targeting drugs to kill off these tumor cells with minimal of no toxicity. This is what I keep saying, everybody. Everybody says, well, I don't believe it. I said, what part of the science do you not believe? We published all of this. We showed you the scientific mechanism. And I'm not the first one to do this. The great scientist Otto Warburg was the first one to show this. I mean, he's a Nobel Prize, he's nominated for the Nobel Prize more than any other scientist in the history. And he said cancer starts as a mitochondrial metabolic problem. The problem with Warburg is he didn't have access to the information that we now have, nor did he do the recent experiments that we did to show the glutamine. He didn't know anything about the glutamine issue. So now we know that glutamine is fermented. The field knows about glutamine, but they all thought it was respired in the mitochondria. Cancer cells cannot respire. Their mitochondria are dysfunctional, okay? And we also showed oxygen consumption is not linked to ATP synthesis in cancer cells like it is in normal cells. Mm-hmm. We did all these experiments. And we clearly then, if you know what you're talking about, if you really understand and you know what you're telling me, give me a person with stage 4 breast cancer, brain cancer, colon cancer. Let me see you use your if you know what you're doing, let me see that person come out. We're seeing that. Obviously, if you know what the hell you're doing, you're going to keep people alive. And we know what we're doing. We're keeping people alive. The problem is too few and far between. There's not enough people that understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Especially in the oncology clinics. They have no clue. What I just told you is completely unheard of or not known in the oncology clinics.
No, absolutely. I know that because I was trained in it and then practiced in there. And we had candy bowls and donuts. And, we just basically were taught nothing about nutrition, let alone about mitochondria or metabolic dysfunction. But so for the listeners, this is a combination. So your approach is a combination of, you include fasting. There's a component of fasting, the ketogenic diet, really shooting for ketones above 4, glucose below 65 with a GKI less than 2. Is that correct? And then the press pulse therapy is an addition. Is that correct? Is that a correct summary?
Yeah, well, we're trying to get away from the term ketogenic diet.
Okay.
Because that pisses off a lot of people in the medical profession.
I've discovered one tool that has completely transformed how my clients heal, resetting their metabolism, activating the body's natural healing, and giving them incredible mental clarity. That tool is water fasting, and you can access my free workshop all about fasting as a healing modality right now. I cover how fasting actually works in your body, the different types of fasts, and how to know which approach is right for you. And most importantly, I cover how to do it safely. Whether you're navigating health challenges, have tried fasting before, or are completely new to it, this workshop is for you. I'll share real success stories from my practice and give you the framework I use with my clients. You can watch it now by accessing the link in this episode's description. This workshop could change how you think about healing entirely. Okay, tell me what's the right word? What's the right term?
It's called therapeutic ketosis.
Okay.
Or nutritional ketosis.
Yeah.
And that could be achieved by ketone supplements or any diet that will bring your glucose ketone index, as you said, down to 2.0 or below. And that could be a restricted Mediterranean diet, a carnivore diet, a pescatarian diet. That's why we say, what is the ketogenic diet? It could be anything that will bring you into a state of nutritional or therapeutic ketosis, which is actually 4 is very nice, 4 millimolar ketones, but you don't have to be even that high. Even if you're a 2 millimolar and your blood sugar is low, you'll get a low GKI. So, and that's it's not only for prevention, because if you keep your mitochondria healthy, the likelihood of getting cancer is remote anyway. So that's why you have these prevention strategies. But nobody's interested in prevention. The only thing that worked for prevention is stop smoking. Okay, I stopped smoking. We saved a lot of people's lives, that's for sure. But then you tell some guy, pounding down a big Twinkie, I don't think you should eat that. Go to hell. I don't want to hear about that. And then he gets a big tumor, a colon tumor. And then he wants to know, what am I going to do? Well, I said, you shouldn't have been eating the Twinkie. It was the Twinkie that gave you the colon tumor. Well, I'm beyond that now. Now what are you going to do for me? So now you have to bring that person's blood sugar down, and you have to put them into a state of nutritional ketosis. And I know the fasting, we love it, but it's hard to do as a cold turkey thing. So what we do, I'm not a physician, so I can't tell people what to do or what not to do. But my colleagues who are physicians, they bring the patient into a state of nutritional ketosis by zero carb diets, extremely low carbohydrate dieting. And whatever brings your GKI down slowly, we do that. And then the body slowly adapts after about 10 to 14 days. And then you can step off into water-only fasting, because now it's not so much of a shock. Your body has been acclimating to this. And you'll notice big time the craving that you have for something sweet as you stop eating sweet things. But you're eating ribeye. You like ribeye steaks? I mean, you like filet mignon with béarnaise sauce on it? Or you like a salmon with the béarnaise sauce? I mean, these things are nice, right? That's not the worst thing in the world, let's be honest. Now, if you're a vegan or a plant eater, you can eat eggs. That'll do it, bacon and eggs. Well, bacon for sure, bacon and eggs. I'm telling you, these are the things that will bring your GKI down. No bread, no rice, potatoes, or any of that kind of stuff. And then you can jump into water-only fasting. Your body then is already acclimated. It's not so much of a big step at the end. It's the difference between wanting to get to the first floor from the second floor. You can either jump out the window and get there in 1 second, or you can take the stairs and get there. It just takes you a little longer as your body acclimates to the new state. And then when you're in that state and approaching that state, then we give drugs that will target the glutamine strategically while you are keeping the glucose down, the ketones up, and now you're targeting the glutamine. And we have these people do a lot of exercise because exercise pulls sugar out of the blood. So you even pull it.
Wait, can I stop you for 1 second? When you're talking about doing exercise, you're talking about if someone is in nutritional ketosis from diet. You're not telling people who are water only fasting to be doing rigorous exercise. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can do that. My friend Dom D'Agostino, right? He was doing 1 week of water. He broke the deadlift record of the world in Guinness's book on a water only fast after 7 days. So now, of course, Dom.
No. Yeah, but not say no. So obviously, someone who's healthy and using fasting, but in a healing state. And this is my personal experience with fasting. People doing prolonged water only fasting is that in order for the healing to occur, they need to be resting. So I'm just wanting to clarify that piece about when you're talking about exercise.
I would say what we're experiencing. With that, and I agree. I know what you're talking about because they have these fasting clinics there. People just walk around there. We're not saying go out and run 10 miles, or walk, and the person would adjust their exercise, whatever the exercise they want. Walking is exercise, okay? Swimming is exercise. The question is, you don't want to overdo it, but you want to do it enough to have an impact on your glucose ketone index. For example, if someone is doing low carbohydrate diet, water only fasting, and they have a GKI of say 2, which is good, but if they were to go out and do a leisurely walk for 15 minutes, and the GKI goes down to 1, and they are not stressed by this level of exercise, it's only therapeutic to do that. I agree 100%. You don't take someone and have them run a marathon.
My experience is that because I do test ketones and glucose and GKI every day in my water only fasters who fast up to 30 days, that once you get past like day 4, their GKI is like 1 or less.
Yeah.
So you really don't need to push that down any further with exercise in terms of the GKI. But let me ask you this. So in the way that you guys are doing this, you're doing 10 days of extremely low carb to get them into nutritional ketosis. Then how long of a water only fast are you doing before you then put them back onto, a diet that is nutritional ketosis?
Yeah, well, that's variable to the type of person that we're dealing with. What are their age? What is their state of health at the beginning?
Let's just say someone like who is robust, who you think could handle, what would your ideal be?
Okay, well, this, again, has to be judged from a variety of different perspectives. Again, what's the body weight of the person? What's their overall viewpoint? There's a lot of things that you need to do.
So let's just say someone has a BMI where they have, weight to lose. They're robust. Someone who's 40 has excess weight, is, in a good spot other than this cancer diagnosis. What would be your kind of ideal?
Well, I think, what we're seeing is that once you get down into that, as you said, 2.0 or below, you have a lot of options now. What are you going to do? And here's where we give them drugs. How do they feel when we do this? Overall, some people say I really feel good. I thought I'd feel a lot worse, but I actually don't. And that you see people that are more flexible. Sometimes we do 2 or 3 days and then bring them back into a low carbohydrate diet. Carnivore really works really well, but again, you don't eat too much. everybody has to realize that if you overeat whatever you're eating, it's going to throw you out of ketosis. So it's more or less like our Paleolithic ancestors. They were always in a state of nutritional ketosis, and they always did a lot of exercise. Now, those days, there was no conveniences that we have today. So we're just trying to bring people back into the Paleolithic state that we were in, and then deliver drugs strategically to target the glutamine. And at the same time, we're using a large number of, the various non-invasive technologies to monitor the tumor. So you have PET scan, MRI, CAT scan, whatever you think would be a good way to determine whether or not that whatever the strategy you're using is successful. So a tumor was there, big, and now it's half the size. Or a small one was there, now it's gone. We've seen a lot of different outcomes with different strategies. We've also seen significant success when a patient is in nutritional ketosis and then a small dose of chemo, at usually much lower dose than what would have been used under standard conditions, and with a tremendous power. Same with radiation. As long as the patient is in nutritional ketosis, you may not need as many doses for as long as you do to get a remarkable outcome. And that I have to leave to the judgment of the physician. They make a decision. They go, oh my God, we have a colon cancer person that I'm working with, Halakis. He was in bad shape. He had a colon cancer spread around his body. It was obstructing he did what you said, water only fasting, and we hit him with the parasite medications, the embendazole, which targets glutamine and glucose. Can you believe it? The parasites use the same pathway as the tumor to get energy. So these parasites, when you're in nutritional ketosis, some of these parasite medications are really important. When this guy was diagnosed, his tumor was already quite large, and they scheduled him for surgery several weeks later to get they put it on. They said you can go for a few weeks. Alicia did the metabolic therapy. The tumor shrunk to the point where he went in for the surgery. There was nothing to cut out. So the guy went back, and they said, well, you look a hell of a lot better. All of his blood work looked really good from the way it was. He had a C-reactive protein that measure that was off the scales. I mean, he was full of inflamed. He was inflamed. He had high sugar in his blood. He was insulin resistant. He had colon cancer. He had all this. And then in a few it was about 3 or 4 weeks for this to really subside. It was unbelievable. And even the oncologists were shocked. And the oncologist says, oh, now he's responding so well. Now we can They were giving him a 50% of the dose of chemo. And then they said, oh, now we can give him 100%. Why would you want to give me it? It already worked at 50%. You want to jack him up even higher? So, and this is the mindset that has to change. We're getting incredible results with less radiation and less chemo, and the outcomes are even more phenomenal.
What's interesting though is, and I think that you hit the nail on the head at the very beginning, is that, and this is what I know from being a healthcare leader. I was really looking at end-to-end cancer care, and there are lots of ways that you can reduce cost, you can reduce toxicity, you can reduce use of medications, but the problem is the system actually doesn't want that. So it's like the reason why it's hard to get to move the needle in this direction of, number one, the physicians are taught nothing about nutrition, which I'm hoping will shift. But the other piece is that what we're doing is we're reducing the revenue of the system by using nutritional ketosis. And I'm on your side. It's like, I know this, but it's like the incentives are the exact reverse, that what they want is what is going to generate revenue, and that's what the system wants. And so anything that is reducing that is potentially a threat to the system.
Well, the system is some vague concept. There are people that control the system. So you just have to know who the hell is controlling the system. And do they have a moral conscience or not? And they have to be identified. And if it's true, then the American Medical Association, or whoever writes the standards of care for cancer, who's responsible for maintaining the standard of care for cancer, and you can have brain cancer and different kinds of cancers have slightly different approaches. If that system is trying to stop an already aggressive problem without linkage to the underlying biology and biochemistry of the problem. And you're hitting it right on the head. But, I hear that comment all the time. I can't believe your profession of physicians go into that.
It's not the physicians.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
the
but
physicians
they're
are caught in the system.
Yeah, they are. They are.
But I know this just from, so when I was, leading end-to-end cancer care for a large healthcare organization, the physicians, the boots on the ground, the people who are actually taking care of the patients want the right things to happen. But the problem is when you shift this, you're basically shifting the incentives at the top level that the whole system is based on revenue from illness, right? And basically you're then reversing and helping people get healthy, which, God help us, this is why we all went into this profession. But it's such a corrupt system. And you're absolutely right that there are people at the top, but it's the pharmaceutical. If I had to say where I think this all comes from, is I think it's the pharmaceutical companies that are really driving the incentives within the healthcare system.
Well, I think it's not just that, and we've already looked into it. Of course, that's a big. You're absolutely 100% right. That is a big problem, because they also. Here's the situation. In 1984, the National Cancer Institute, the progress towards the cure, and I hate to use the term. I don't like to use the term cure for cancer. I like to use the term successful management of cancer. Maybe it'll never come back, and you can say you were cured, but cure is an arrogant term, usually giving people false hope about things. Let's look for a successful management. You had something that was potentially life-threatening, and now it's not. We keep some of these people alive who have so-called terminal cancer for 10 years with glioblastoma. He should have been dead a long time ago. Was he cured? No, it's still there, but he's managed. So, and we look at breast cancer, we look at colon cancer like that. These people are given 6 months to live, and they're alive 10 years later. But they're maybe not completely cured, but they're managed successfully. But let's look at the 1984. The race to the successful management was slow. So let's invite the big pharmaceutical companies into the academic labs at the top hospitals to see if we could accelerate the race to the successful management. How's that working? 1,700 people a day dying, right? That ain't working. Okay. So once you corrupt the system with big money, then you actually, and a wrong theory under which the nature of the disease is, you're not going to get the kind of progress that you would have expected. Not only that, the National Cancer Institute awards, their budget is something like $7 billion. And a lot of that research money goes to guys chasing genes, gene chasers. It's not a genetic disease. You're flushing your money away on stuff that's largely irrelevant. And they keep telling you that, you got an ALK1 mutation and you got this and you got that. No. You have dysregulated metabolism. You're fermenting. Take away the fermentable fuels and you manage the disease.
Can you say for the listeners, I've heard you say this, but we actually did it off camera last time. It was after the end of our interview. But can you explain why we have the genetic mutations and how the genetic mutations are actually the result of the metabolic dysfunction rather than the cause of the cancer? Can you explain that? Because I think that's really powerful. People need to hear this.
Yeah, well, the question is, where do all these mutations come from in the first place?
Yeah.
It's shifted when we started to look at the deep genomic sequences of cancers. And we started to know it was known from the early days of the 1900s that there are chromosomal abnormalities in cancer, and maybe that was the cause of this or that. And, people, and then our love of molecular biology drove us to start looking at the structure and function of DNA and genes. And we found mutations, all kinds of mutations in cancer cells from a variety of different cancers. And then we started to think that maybe those mutations are responsible for dysregulated cell growth. So we study the cell cycles of cells, and we find them out of control, and they have a lot of mutations, and we find mutations here and there. And that was thought to be the holy grail of what's causing the dysregulated growth. In the mitochondrial metabolic theory, we have the origin of the mutations is coming from chronic is disruption of oxidative phosphorylation. So the mitochondria produce ROS, reactive oxygen species, the hydroxyl anion and the superoxide. They in low amounts, they're very important for signaling and keeping things working. But in high amounts from chronic disruption, they're carcinogenic and mutagenic. So the mitochondria are pouring out carcinogens themselves in the form of ROS. And the ROS cause the mutations in the genome. So they're downstream effects of the damage to the oxidative phosphorylation. This was the oncogenic paradox pointed out by Albert Szent-Györgyi, a Nobel Prize guy himself, who said there is a paradox that no one solved. We solved the paradox. How is it possible that oncogenic viruses, intermittent hypoxia, radiation, systemic inflammation, viruses, age, all of these things can be linked to cancer incidence? What is the common pathophysiological mechanism by which all these provocative agents, a whole disparate group of things, could possibly cause dysregulated cell growth? And the answer is every one of those provocative agents in one way or another chronically disrupts the ability of that organelle in a particular cell or in a particular organ, a group of cells in an organ, to start failing in their ability to produce energy efficiently, producing ROS. It's a vicious cycle, more ROS, more damage, more ROS, causing mutations as downstream effects. And then the cell, in order to remain alive, it has to transition away from this highly efficient energy system to these inefficient systems called fermentation, as we talked about, driven by glucose and glutamine. But the mitochondria appear to be suffocating because they're not producing enough energy. They signal the nucleus to open up the floodgates, bringing in glucose and glutamine. So we have these oncogenes that are facilitators of opening the floodgates, the transporters for glucose and glutamine, to transition the cell away from respiratory high energy through respiration. So they then generate this fermentation mechanism. But what's really important, the connection to all of the hallmarks of cancer and the dysregulated cell growth, is that the efficiency of energy metabolism in the mitochondria itself controls internal calcium signaling. It's internal calcium signaling. And that signaling controls the checkpoints of the cell cycle. So the cells know when to grow and when not to grow based on cycles of calcium generated by the mitochondria. So the mitochondria can actually sense the neighborhood because one of the things that cancer cells no longer respond to is contact inhibition. Normally when cells are they call it a society of cells. All the liver cells are packed together. They're doing their general function, the lung cells, the colon cells, the breast cells. But cancer cells no longer respond to contact inhibition. And that's all controlled by dysregulated internal calcium signaling from the mitochondria. Thereby, the checkpoints that are supposed to control the growth are no longer under the regulation because the efficiency of respiration is dysfunctional and the cells fall back on their default state, which is proliferation, the way it was before oxygen came into the atmosphere 2.5 billion years ago. And they're running through the cycle unregulated. The stop signs are no longer there because the cycling, well, what's controlling the cycling? The mitochondria. Well, how did you destroy that? Well, the ROS broke up the mitochondria. The signaling is off, and the cells are running through a dysregulated growth driven by fermentation metabolism, which is glucose and glutamine. So we've been able to put the whole package together. And all of the characteristics that you see in cancer are all downstream effects of what I've just described. So how do you stop this whole thing? Is you've got to take away the two fermentable fuels and transition the whole body to a fuel that the tumor cells can't use because their respiration is defective. You need good respiration to burn fatty acids in ketone bodies. As a matter of fact, we published a big paper. All major cancers in the cytoplasm have lipid droplets, triglyceride lipid droplets. And the field of cancer thinks they're there to drive the dysregulated growth as an energy source. No, they're there because they're there because they can't drive. They're stored there to protect the cell. If the cell tries to use that, it's going to get too much ROS and die. So the fatty acids are collected in the cytoplasm as a marker for insufficient oxidative phosphorylation. So clearly, we've put all the parts of this puzzle together. We know exactly, I wouldn't say exactly, but we know more about this than anyone else does. And the And how do we know? I published these papers, and we put the information out there. The problem is I'm saying so many things that are antagonistic to the field, the system. The system, we have shown where the system has made major errors, and we have shown the path to this. And then when we take away these fuels and transition the body, we get tremendous management. So it clearly tells us we know what we're doing. The problem is the field has been stuck in this rut for 50 to 75 years, thinking it's something other than what it is. Now, listen to this. New information is coming out now with deep sequencing of our normal cells in our body, your body and my body. We take tissues out from some part of our whatever tissue we want to do, and now we run deep sequencing genomic analysis on these tissues. And guess what? We see all these driver gene mutations that were linked to dysregulated cell growth. They thought that there's no dysregulated cell growth. Our bodies are full of these driver mutations in different cells of our body that are not in dysregulated cell growth. And then we have now we're finding these cancers that have no mutations. So, but every cancer has dysfunctional mitochondria. That's the problem. Everyone. Yeah. So cancer is one singular disease, whether it's a brain tumor, breast cancer, colon cancer, bladder cancer, melanoma, they all have dysfunctional mitochondria. They're all fermenting, and we know how to kill them, and we know how to manage them because it's one singular disease. This is another fact that the system does not want to hear. Because when you hear the advertisements on the news at night, we have a special just for your cancer. No. We have this thing for anybody's cancer. We treat it as one singular disease having a common pathophysiological problem. And you show me a tumor cell that can survive on glucose and without glucose and glutamine and has a normal respiratory system, and I'll throw the towel in here. We don't need to talk anymore. I've offered money to students. They're killing themselves trying to find cancer cells that have normal respiration and don't use glucose and glutamine. They can't find them. So we know what we need to do to manage the cancer. We know what causes cancer. And Otto Warburg, unfortunately, didn't have access to the new information that we have. He was right as concept, but he was, beat up and thrown under the bus, running off chasing genes that have had no major impact on reducing death rates. And 50% of these drugs are killing people, and they cost you an arm and a leg, and it's just like it's a terrible, broken system that we can put easily back on track and keep people alive.
So let me ask you a question about, because one of the things that, and I actually love that you said it's not a ketogenic diet, because it's so interesting. I see so many people and they're like, I'm on a ketogenic diet. And I'm like, okay, well, tell me what you're eating. And then I'm like, okay, there's no way nutritional ketosis. Like, it's like no way with what they're eating, right? And so I love that. It's like, it requires measuring. So my listeners, like, nutritional therapeutic ketosis requires you to be measuring and to have a GKI less than 2.0. So that it's not like this, I'm eating more fat and I'm going to say I'm on a ketogenic diet. And that's what Professor Seyfried is talking about. This is a very clearly defined. But the other thing that people come to me, ask me about is they're like, I hear Dr. Seyfried, I'm like on board. This is absolutely, I believe in this. And then they're like, I can't find a provider who's doing the press pulse and the Dawn. They can't get the Dawn. So what is the mechanism? How are people to access this glutamine, depleting therapies?
Well, this is the great tragedy. Why the Food and Drug Administration doesn't reevaluate what's going on here. What do they have? No functional brain cells? I mean, what, or are they controlled by the system? This is the thing. Tell me what number you'd like me to change to make everything okay for you. The issue. That's why we have parasite medications. And people, we tested M-bendazole. We have a paper out, and for pediatric brain cancer. My God, what we can do to save these little kids with pediatric brain cancer. We know how to stop the tumor. We know how to manage this so these kids aren't brutalized by the system. And we published the paper, and we showed that M-bendazole, a parasite medication, targets glycolysis and glutaminolysis.
And you're saying M-bendazole, not M-bendazole, E-B or
M-E.
Mebendazole.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Mebendazole.
Okay.
It's like fenbendazole.
Yeah, no, I know. I wasn't hearing the M. I was hearing just M. Okay. So mebendazole.
Mebendazole.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, and we've tested that. And if I had money, I would test ivermectin and I would test fenbendazole and possibly some of the other parasite medications. Every time we run one of these studies, it's about $50,000 or $60,000. People think, oh, can you just run this for me? I got a staff of the most highly trained professionals and the best preclinical animal models, natural, not these genetically engineered things, the natural cancers that we have in the mouse that represent what humans have. And it's hard to manage these just as it is to manage human cancers, but we're getting tremendous success because we're starting to understand these things. But we're constantly looking for powerful synergies between diet drug combinations. Once you're in nutritional ketosis, we're finding that there's some powerful synergies that exist where we can manage these tumors without toxicity. But this costs money. And our entire program is supported by philanthropy and private foundations. Pancreatic cancer and breast cancer and brain cancer. I mean,
so I want to just come back to this question. So if people want to find these therapies, how are they to find them? I mean, the mebendazole is easy.
No, okay, that's the system. Okay, the system is not trained or knowledgeable to use press pulse metabolic therapy. It's not sanctioned by the system. Whatever the system is, medical associations, cancer boards, or whatever it is, that's the system. And the problem, as I have come to know and others, is that some of these systems are acceptable to it, metabolic therapy that is, once they've expended all the toxic poisons and mutilations and everything else they do, and they say this patient is now terminal, there's nothing more we can do, go home and make peace with God and your family or whatever. And then maybe they'll say, oh, you might want to do metabolic therapy. Well, for crying out loud, you pull the cards out for this poor person. Do metabolic therapy first, and if the cancer disappears, you don't need radiation and chemo. The worst example of this is brain cancer, where we take these poor souls that have glioblastoma, and they will not. Before we can do metabolic therapy, we have to irradiate the brain. That is counterproductive. It frees up massive amounts of glucose and glutamine in the microenvironment of the brain, feeding the very cells you're trying to kill. And it makes it much, much more difficult to get longer-term survival after radiation. We shrink the tumor down, make it small, indolent, and non-aggressive, cut it out, have the surgeon come in, debulk the tumor. And we know that the more you debulk, the longer you're going to live, and then transition this person off to a metabolic therapy with glutamine targeting drugs and nutritional ketosis. You should not need radiation.
I'm with you 100%. So this is the question that people ask me is, how do I find a provider who does these therapies, who can get access to the drugs? Because that is the question that people are asking. That
Okay, you want to know?
I do want to know.
Go ask RFK Jr. That's the guy. He's one of the guys who can change this.
So it's basically just because that you can't get Dawn because the FDA is not. What is it's not FDA approved? Is that what the issue is?
Well, here it was used in phase 2 clinical trials years ago. If you look back at the history of this drug, it was an antibiotic isolated from some bark or something, and it was used for a variety of cancers. But they had the same level of toxicity that they have for some of the chemos that we have today, lumistine and vincristine and cisplatin and these kinds of things. But for little kids with leukemia, it actually had some therapeutic benefit. But none of the trials were targeting glucose at the same time. So the drug, if you target glucose, you can lose much lower concentrations of the drug, thereby significantly reducing toxicity.
Got it.
And the drug is a dirty drug. You know what a dirty drug is? They don't like that. Pharmaceutical companies hate dirty drugs, okay, because you can't patent them. The problem is the DON targets multiple families of glutaminases, not one subunit and one member of the family, which would be a blockbuster, but because it's like whack-a-mole. Oh, I hit that subunit. They take glutamine through that pathway. Take glutamine. DON shuts them all down simultaneously, makes it very effective. But you have to use it strategically. You don't want to harm your immune system. So this is what I'm saying. You need to know something about the biology and biochemistry of the cells, the normal cells and the tumor cells that you're trying to manage.
But it sounds like even with the doctors who know how to use this right now, it's not available in terms of using Dawn. Is there another? So would you have people use mebendazole, and are the doses similar to what's being What is the dose of mebendazole?
Well, we started originally at the doses they give to kids with parasites in India, was 200 milligrams a day for 3 days, and the parasites were dropping out of the people, right? But for cancer, we because it doesn't go away in 3 days. So what we know is that we strategically different physicians in the Society of Metabolic Oncology are learning different concentrations, different dosages and timings to work with this. And I believe there's going to be a lot of use and this is another thing that really pisses me off. Mebendazole is 50 cents a tablet in India, right? As soon as the oncology field realized it might work for cancer, it's $300 a tablet.
Yeah.
What the hell is wrong with these people? Have they no moral conscience? Are they immoral? I mean, who's running the show here? Our goal here is not to make money, at least me, is to keep people alive without toxicity. So maybe I'm a weirdo.
I'm with you.
Right?
So let me ask you this. So you said a statement in there, Metabolic Oncology Society. Is that what you said?
Yeah. It's the International Society of Metabolic Oncology.
So
this is
can people find physicians who are in this who are looking at the dosing of mebendazole?
All of the physicians are currently trying to negotiate the system. Okay, as you would say. So, and the fear, of course, if you're an MD with a license and you choose to do something that's not sanctioned by the system, you could potentially lose your license for something that's actually much better than what the system is pushing.
Oh, yeah.
So you run up against the system. And what we need to do is have someone strong enough to challenge the system and find out who are the individuals. Is it some amorphous cloud in the sky that's dictating this? Or is there some guy sitting there breathing or a group of people that are standing in the way of progress, preventing people from experiencing what they should be able to experience at a reasonable cost without the level of toxicity? Who are these people standing in the way of progress? That's what I want to know. Is it the National Cancer Institute itself? If they're on their website telling people that cancer is a genetic disease, then they have a serious problem in understanding scientific research. All right? And we're publishing more and more stuff like, so are they part of the system as well? We have RFK screaming and yelling about all this stuff. Why doesn't he do something good and challenge the system? He's telling people now you can go out and eat saturated fats, which is okay as long as it's calorie restricted. And as long as you're measuring your GKI at the same time.
Well, I mean, I do think actually that particular move of removing the constraints of saturated fats is a move in the right direction, because that basically was completely false data that was created by. So what I'm hearing from you is that it's really hard right now for people to get access to these particular medications. And I hate to say this, but I'm going to have you back because I want to talk about mitophagy and fasting and get more into that piece of it. But I'm so glad actually that we were able to at least address this, because this is the question, just as like the boots on the ground provider who is outside the system. And by the way, like when I started talking about using water fasting for healing, I was told, you know what, doctors are taken out for that, like for saying those things out loud, that you're things out loud. So I understand why these doctors are afraid, because it's real. Like there are entities, beings, whatever you want to call it, powers that be that don't want these things to change. So I understand that. And I think this is important for people to know, that it is hard right now to get your hands on these medications and find physicians who are able to.
But that's even with that, we are publishing papers on case reports of advanced breast cancer, brain cancer, and these kinds of things, publishing in peer-reviewed journals.
No, 100%. The data is there. You guys have published the data. The problem is the people who want to access it. That's who we're speaking to now on this podcast. Is those people are like, okay, short of a study.
Okay, well, this is where it gets into the difficulty, because I have people listening to me. Oh, he says that. Don't forget, the reason why I can say all this is because I'm not part of the system. I don't have a license to lose, right? So I can do the science, and I can publish the science, and I can talk about the science without fear that I'm going to lose my license. My job at Boston College is to teach undergraduate and graduate students biology and biochemistry, and they like this. And we use cancer as a demonstration to integrate large areas of biology and biochemistry. But the poor guy person that has a metastatic cancer goes to his oncologist and says, "I would like to have metabolic therapy. Press pulse, thank you." Why, you can't do that. We're going to have to give you the standard of care. One shoe fits all. And I'm saying this is the greatest tragedy in the history of medicine, that we have a clear plan and strategy to manage a very difficult and life-threatening disease, and yet we cannot use it. This should make anyone with cancer outraged. Where the hell is the public outrage on this? That's what I want to know. And I feel so bad because I get emails back from all these people going to their oncologist saying, glucose has nothing to do with cancer. Eat whatever you want. Yeah. What, are you kidding me? That's malpractice, for crying out loud. So it's the lack of knowledge. And I don't know if they intentionally, as you said, boots on the ground. Maybe the new generation will have a better understanding of this. But there's a lot of resistance on the part of physicians themselves to do this. Not only the system.
But I can speak to that part. So having been a physician who is in the system and decided to leave, there's so much security tied up in all of that, right? Like I gave up a salary to, step out into the unknown and not, be looking at a revenue generated way of supporting myself, not thinking about the money first, but thinking about the patient first. And I can just say that most physicians, are caught in this, they're caught on the rat race, whatever it is that they can't get off. And so, but I think, I'm just so grateful for you putting this science out. And this is part of it is letting more people know and really understanding the science. And I think how you described that this is not a genetic condition, but it's the dysfunctional mitochondria that basically you then create the free radical, reactive oxygen species that then lead to the genetic mutations. And cancer is kind of the last step in this metabolic dysfunction of real illness, that if we can address that, we can basically reverse so many of the illnesses that we're seeing in today's world. But I think education is the first step. And then it's funny because you said at the beginning of this, you're like, when do I get to go relax and go to a home and just whatever? And I'm like, when the passion goes out of you, I'm watching. You're so passionate about this, but that's incredible because, and I think it's so unfortunate that we have to feel so frustrated and have this message inside of us that we feel like nobody is listening to. But the truth is people are hearing you. And I'm so grateful for one, that there is someone like you who is publishing the science, who's putting the stuff together so that those of us who are out trying to help people in the right way can find solutions, because it doesn't have to be the toxic therapy that we've been taught.
No. And we have some things that are coming down the pike that are really going to blow the doors off the system. So, and it's going to be hard to cover this up because there's too much science behind it and there's too much momentum for it. And that you're not going to be able to shut down. And it's coming. So I'm just telling people, brace yourselves. The paradigm change is coming and it will come and it will take over the entire system in the right direction. And there will be losers and there will be winners. But the big winner is going to be the cancer patient and a lot of other people suffering from chronic diseases. So just hold on to your hats. It's coming.
Beautiful. I love that. As my mentor always says, you can only block the sun with your thumb for so long. Eventually you're going to see that there's the sun there. So I cannot wait for that.
As long as I have people that are philanthropists without strings who just want to see this happen and feel good about it. And don't forget, when we publish papers, if you notice my papers, you'll say, look at the acknowledgement. Who the hell are all these people? They names in these papers. Well, those are the guys footing the bills for what we're doing. So people say, well, who's this guy? Who's that guy? Who's this guy? These are the philanthropists that help us out. And I acknowledge them by putting their name on the papers that I publish, just to let them know that we're so appreciative of what they're doing to allow us to continue to do the research here at Boston College.
I love it.
And we're not a medical school, so we're not yoked by the system is not part of our institution. So I can do these kinds of research and feel comfortable about doing it.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming back on. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. And I just love your passion. And I'm so grateful, like I said, for the work that you're doing, because you're laying the foundation for when, the change, when it's ready. And I don't know when that's going to be, but I'm just super grateful for the work that you do. So thank you so much for being here. And if people wanted to find you, how can they find you?
Well, they email me at my
Oh,
Boston College website, and I give
okay.
them kits of information. And I only ask for donations only if the information I give them helps them. I'm not asking any money from anybody unless the stuff we give them. It's educational information. It doesn't tell them what to do or what they should or should
Yeah.
not do. It's educational information to make them knowledgeable about what they have and strategies that they would use. And of course, discussing it with a knowledgeable physician is the way to move forward.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you back on the show. Thank
Well,
you.
thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure to have you to be here.
Thank you for being here today. Please enjoy a previous episode of Born to Heal. And if you found value in our conversation, please subscribe and share with someone who might benefit. Have questions? Drop them in the YouTube comments or message me on Instagram. Links are in the episode description. Remember, just like me, you were born to heal.